Allo Allo, 1982 to 1992, was one of Britain's most iconic sitcoms, filled with hilarious misunderstandings, eccentric characters, and unforgettable catchphrases. While the series brought joy to millions, the lives of many of its beloved cast members took tragic turns after the camera stopped rolling. Some faced heartbreaking illnesses, personal struggles, and untimely deaths that shocked fans around the world. In this video, we look back at the stars who made Allo Allo a comedy classic and explore the bittersweet stories of those who have sadly passed away. Their humor lives on, but their real-life endings were far from funny. Gordon Kaye was born on April 7, 1941, in Huddersfield, England, and took on the iconic role of René Artois in Allo Allo in 1982 at age 41. René, the beleaguered cafe owner caught between the German army, the French resistance, and multiple mistresses, was brought to life by Kaye's masterful blend of cowardice and reluctant bravery. Audiences loved René's constant exasperation, dry wit, and sly glances to camera, a performance that defined Kaye's career. But the man behind the smirk bore little resemblance to his cheeky on-screen persona. Born Gordon Fitzgerald Kaye to an unmarried teenage mother and later adopted by a working-class couple, his early life was marked by shame, secrecy, and a struggle for identity. He hid his homosexuality for decades, even from close friends, fearing the stigma that could have ruined his career in conservative 1970s Britain. Despite early work on Coronation Street and stage plays, Kaye's career was littered with tension. He was known to lash out at directors, and many collaborators found him unpredictable and emotionally volatile. His biggest professional downfall came after a harrowing car accident in 1990 during a storm that left his skull fractured. A photographer illegally captured his unconscious body in the hospital. Though Kaye sued the Sunday Sport, the incident devastated him. After Allo Allo ended, he found himself typecast and marginalized, with only sporadic voice work and pantomime roles. His solitary lifestyle worsened. He reportedly struggled with alcohol and mounting paranoia. Friends revealed he became reclusive, obsessively guarding his image and estate. Never married and with no children, he was said to have cut ties with some family and remained guarded even near the end. Gordon Kaye died on January 23, 2017, aged 75, from complications of dementia at a care home in Knaresborough. At his death, his estate was modest, reportedly valued under £500,000, mostly composed of meager BBC royalties and savings. Sam Kelly, born on December 19, 1943, took on the role of Captain Hans Geering in 1982 at the age of 39. As the hilariously clueless Nazi officer in Allo Allo, his catchphrase, Tiller, and blank expressions became cult favorites. His character's blend of ineptitude and misplaced loyalty made him a standout comic presence, adored by viewers for his offbeat timing and subversive charm. But behind the mask of laughter lay a man molded by silent pain. Kelly was raised by a single mother after his father abandoned them, and he spent much of his youth in boarding schools, where he endured bullying and emotional isolation. He rarely spoke of those years, instead channeling his buried trauma into the broken, comic characters he portrayed. Despite his TV success, Kelly's stage work often went unnoticed and unappreciated financially. He faced repeated career hurdles, being overlooked for major roles due to his low-profile persona, and even dropped without explanation from multiple West End projects. A lesser-known scandal occurred in the 1990s when Kelly abruptly exited a BBC comedy pilot amid rumors of a feud with the producer over creative control and accusations of verbal outbursts. Off-screen, his private life remained largely under wraps, but those close to him whispered of a failed long-term relationship with a fellow actor that ended in bitterness. He never married and had no children, living instead in a modest London flat filled with books and scripts. His final years were marred by illness and a quiet withdrawal from public life. Sam Kelly died on June 14, 2014, of cancer, aged 70, in a hospice in Esher, Surrey. He left behind no significant fortune. His estate was estimated at under £500,000. And while his name never topped tabloids, those who knew him remember a man who gave everything to the craft, yet left this world quietly without the recognition he perhaps deserved. Carmen Silvera, born on June 2, 1922, in Toronto, Canada, stepped into the role of Edith Artois in Allo Allo in 1982 at the age of 60. As Renee's oblivious yet emotionally intense wife, Edith was the heart of the café, famous for her off-key singing and theatrical patriotism. Viewers adored her unshakable loyalty, even as she remained hilariously unaware of her husband's constant infidelity. Off-camera, however, Carmen's life was defined by turmoil, secrecy, and emotional control. Raised in a strict household after moving to England, Carmen survived evacuation during World War II, but the trauma of losing her father under suspicious circumstances in a mental institution never left her. A devout Catholic upbringing clashed with her ambitions as an actress, and she rebelled early by pursuing stage work, even at the cost of family ties. Silvera faced repeated professional rejection in her early years. Some blamed her difficult temperament. During the 1960s, she had a brief and undisclosed marriage that ended in a bitter annulment, but she never publicly acknowledged the identity of her former husband. Industry insiders described her as calculating, even manipulative, particularly toward younger actresses. In Allo Allo, she was rumored to have clashed with male co-stars over screen time, especially during later seasons. Her insistence on creative input led to tension with producers, nearly resulting in her being written out by season 7. Despite these reports, she remained fiercely devoted to her craft, turning down several commercial film roles to stay in theater and BBC television. In private, Carmen lived alone in a modest West London flat, often seen attending performances solo. She had no children, and her closest companion was reportedly a female friend, whose relationship with her was never clarified, sparking quiet speculation about her private life. Health-wise, she suffered from several mini-strokes in her 70s and was diagnosed with lung cancer in the late 1990s. A direct result of her heavy smoking habit, she was rarely seen without a cigarette. She died on August 3, 2002 at the age of 80 in Denville Hall, a home for retired actors. Her estate, estimated under £300,000, included modest savings, personal possessions, and rerun royalties, most of which she left to charity. Jack Hedley, born October 28, 1929, stepped into Allo Allo in 1992 as General von Karzabrad at the age of 63. The role, though brief, saw him embody a cold, stone-faced Nazi general, injecting an air of authority that counterbalanced the show's zaniness. But Hedley's real-life tale was far grittier than the characters he played. Abandoned as a child, raised in post-war poverty by a single mother, and later renamed to escape his illegitimacy, Hedley carried a lifelong resentment toward the acting industry that he claimed never appreciated men like me. His early years were defined by war, not on screen, but in the flesh. He served in the Royal Marines, seeing action in brutal colonial conflicts, only to return and find the post-war British film scene dominated by class-bound favoritism. His acting career, despite flashes of prominence in films like The Longest Day and For Your Eyes Only, was repeatedly undermined by industry politics and his infamous temper. He was notoriously difficult to work with, once banned from a major BBC production after verbally abusing a director on set. The press rarely caught wind of his outbursts, but insiders speak of several blacklisted projects and hushed legal threats. In his personal life, he remained deeply reclusive. He never married, was estranged from his only son, and once declared in an interview that family is just another battlefield. In later years, Hedley refused fan mail, rebuffed reunions, and publicly stated he hated acting. He died alone of a heart attack on December 11, 2021, at age 92 in his home in London. His estate, mostly tied up in real estate and pension assets, was valued under £1 million. Despite a resume that spanned decades, Jack Hedley left behind more regrets than accolades, and a legacy wrapped in silence, bitterness, and hard-won stoicism. Eric Dodson was born on December 1, 1920, and appeared in Allo Allo in 1991 as the British intelligence officer at age 71. Though a brief role, His stern, clipped delivery and bureaucratic coldness left a sharp impression amidst the show's farcical chaos. Viewers remember him as the embodiment of wartime formality, a man whose gravitas disrupted the comedic whirlwind. But behind that rigid mask, Dodson harbored a past marked by shadows and survival. Raised in a household shattered by the early death of his mother and a cold disciplinarian father, Eric developed emotional detachment early. At school, he was mocked for his stutter, which he eventually conquered through sheer willpower and a growing obsession with voice control. Later, his trademark. His acting career, built after surviving harrowing bombing missions in World War II, was respectable, but riddled with invisible ceilings. Repeatedly overlooked for major roles due to his intimidating air and lack of charm, he was pigeonholed into secondary authority figures. His darkest failure came in the early 70s, when after a breakdown during a stage production, he was quietly replaced, an event he never publicly acknowledged. Though he projected steadiness, Dodson's private life was marked by emotional repression. He never married, lived alone, and was rumored to have had a long-standing but secret relationship with a fellow RAF veteran, never acknowledged due to the era's stigma. Dodson died on January 13, 2000, in Cheltenham at 79, from causes that were never officially disclosed, fueling minor speculation. His estate, primarily consisting of modest real estate and pension savings, was valued under £400,000, a quiet end for a man who spent his life fading into the background of British television. Stanley Leane, born September 24, 1934, in East Ham, London, stepped into the world of Allo Allo in 1991 at age 57, portraying the gypsy leader, a short-lived but flamboyant character who brought an eccentric charm to the show's final season. Though only a brief appearance, Leane's deep, commanding voice and gravitas gave the role unexpected weight, echoing the mystical and enigmatic figures he often played. But Stanley's life was far from the folklore he embodied. Raised in a strict Jewish household during the shadow of World War II, his childhood was clouded by fear, poverty, and emotional suppression. He rarely spoke of his family, and insiders claim he harbored deep resentment toward a father he considered tyrannical and controlling. After training at RADA, he found some success in the theater, but his temper and bluntness earned him a reputation for being unmanageable. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, Stanley struggled with typecasting, often relegated to villains, judges, and priests, which mirrored his own emotional distance from others. Behind the camera, he was known for frequent outbursts, allegedly berating younger actors and clashing with producers over minor script changes. A disastrous audition for a major BBC drama in the late 80s, where he reportedly stormed out mid-reading, is said to have cost him a long-term television deal. Stanley never married, and though he maintained a public image of dignity, he led an isolated personal life in Faversham, where neighbors described him as reclusive and strangely paranoid about being recognized. He suffered a slow professional decline in the 1990s, withdrawing from acting altogether. His death on November 23, 2014, at age 80, was barely reported, and the cause was never officially disclosed, sparking whispered rumors of cancer or even assisted death, though nothing was confirmed. His estate was estimated at under £500,000, mostly from property and savings, with little trace of beneficiaries. A quiet, even ghostly exit for a man who had spent decades commanding the stage. Roger Hammond, born on March 21, 1936, took on the role of the monk in Allo Allo in 1991 at the age of 55. Though the part was minor, Hammond's portrayal left a striking impression with its quiet authority and theatrical presence, an almost eerie contrast to the show's chaotic farce. His character, cloaked in religious solemnity, yet absurd in context, became a strange fan favorite. Yet behind that polished voice and composed face was a man whose life had been steeped in repression, loneliness, and invisible grief. Born in Stockport to a cold, religious family, Roger endured a rigid, loveless upbringing, dominated by an emotionally absent father and a judgmental mother. Humiliated for his weight and stutter as a child, He learned early to mask pain with poise. Though he studied at Cambridge and trained at RADA, his intelligence became a curse. He was too academic for popular television, too theatrical for mainstream cinema. Rejected from a major BBC Shakespeare production in the late 1970s for being unrelatable, he spiraled into depression and, according to whispered accounts, developed a dependency on prescription laudanum, a Victorian relic he justified as creative fuel. Professionally respected but personally distant, Hammond had few close friendships. His short marriage to actress Miranda Davies ended in an ugly, silent split, possibly triggered by his rumored same-sex affair at Cambridge, a secret he took to the grave. Though never publicly outed, friends spoke of a deep melancholy that haunted him. In his later years, he withdrew almost entirely from public life. Diagnosed with cancer, he refused further treatment, opting instead for silence. He died on November 8, 2012, in Ealing, London, aged 76. He left behind a modest estate under £500,000, comprised mostly of rare books, theater memorabilia, and unclaimed royalty checks. Though his name never headlined billboards, Hammond's impact lingered in the shadows of British theater, an actor's actor, burdened by intellect, secrecy, and a lifetime of elegant sorrow. Jeremy Lloyd, born on July 22, 1930, played Wolfgang in Allo Allo in 1992, at age 62, a fleeting appearance that belied his monumental influence as the show's co-creator. But behind the scenes, Lloyd was a chaotic genius whose life was every bit as unpredictable as the scripts he penned. Known for his lanky frame and oddball sense of humor, Lloyd shaped an era of British comedy while indulging in a lifestyle full of wild contradictions. Though he grew up in privilege, his childhood was emotionally barren, abandoned by his parents and raised by his nanny, fueling lifelong insecurities. He failed at several early acting gigs, once fired from a live TV show for turning up drunk on set. A notorious womanizer, Lloyd's short-lived marriage to Joanna Lumley was plagued by his mood swings and deep mistrust. At one point in the 70s, he vanished for several days after a failed business scheme with a shady nightclub investor left him fearing for his life. He later claimed he narrowly escaped becoming a victim of the Manson family, stating he had been invited to Sharon Tate's house the night of the infamous murders, though this remains unverified. His most damaging professional setback came when he was accused of plagiarizing dialogue from an obscure French sitcom, an allegation that tainted his reputation in certain circles despite no legal consequences. Lloyd remained eccentric to the end, living in near isolation in a cluttered London flat filled with vintage mannequins and typewriters. He died of pneumonia on December 23, 2014, at age 84. His net worth was estimated between £2 to £3 million, bolstered by decades of royalties, though many say his real wealth was locked in quirky memorabilia and uncashed checks he forgot to deposit. John Bluthall, born August 12, 1929, in Jeziorzyany, Poland, joined Allo Allo in 1984 as the local tailor, a small but delightfully quirky character that briefly stitched its way into the fabric of the show's early humor. He was 55 at the time. While the role was minor, Bluthall's comedic instincts and improvisational flair made it memorable, just as he had done throughout his long, shape-shifting career. His life, however, was one of displacement and deep-seated trauma hidden beneath the laughter. Escaping Poland in 1938 with his Jewish family, Bluthall fled growing anti-Semitic violence. The scars of refugee life shaped his sense of humor and also made him obsessively driven. In his early years in London, he lived in boarding houses and often went hungry while chasing theater work. His career bloomed in the 1950s with Spike Milligan's Q series, yet his volatile friendship with Milligan was marred by repeated fallouts. Insiders described their dynamic as love-hate, with Milligan once accusing Bluthall of sabotaging sketches. Though never a headline maker, Bluthall had a complicated private life. He was intensely private, yet rumors persisted for years of a strained marriage and emotional estrangement from his only daughter, who later moved to Australia and reportedly rarely spoke to him. Professionally, he struggled with feelings of inferiority in comparison to his peers, often saying in private that he was undervalued and typecast. A failed transition to leading roles in the 1970s left him embittered, and he returned to minor parts in radio and voice acting. Bluthall spent his final years in Sydney, away from the British press and industry that had once adored him. He died on November 15, 2018, at age 89, from complications after a fall. His net worth at death was modest, estimated under £600,000, including property in Australia and small pension earnings. Despite a career filled with laughter, he died quietly, his contributions mostly remembered by those who paid close attention to the margins of British comedy. Michael Sher was born on June 18, 1938, and appeared in Allo Allo in 1992 at age 54, cast in the eerily perfect role of Goering's double, a cameo that played off Sher's long-established association with Nazi roles. To fans, it was just another clever casting decision, but to Sher, it was a bitter reminder of how tightly he had been typecast. Born in Aberdeen to a stern Scottish Methodist family, Sher was raised in a house where discipline, silence, and perfection were demanded. He struggled with social anxiety and obsessive-compulsive behaviors, which he masked behind his acting ambitions. After training at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, he pursued stage work before being lured into television. But instead of the Shakespearean grandeur he once dreamed of, Sher quickly became the industry's favorite face of fascism. He played Adolf Hitler 5 times and Heinrich Himmler 3 times. And while the paycheck was reliable, it came with a soul-crushing price. Privately, he despised the association. The media dubbed him the professional Nazi, and the label haunted him. His biggest heartbreak came when Lucasfilm dropped him from a planned extended role in Return of the Jedi, a devastating career blow he called his silent collapse. Known for his role as the terrifying Mr. Bronson in Grange Hill, Sher's commanding presence masked his inner turmoil. He battled alcoholism in the early 90s, once reportedly showing up drunk to a convention where he berated fans and was nearly banned from future appearances. He married actress Rosalie Sher, but the relationship was strained, often defined by separations and intense arguments over money and his career choices. Their 2 children eventually distanced themselves from his public persona. Despite this, Sher remained active in fan circuits, clinging to the love of sci-fi followers as his final form of validation. Diagnosed with cancer in 2004, he continued to attend conventions against medical advice, refusing to slow down. He died on August 31, 2005, in Newport, Isle of Wight, at the age of 67. His net worth at death was under £1 million, made up of royalties and fan memorabilia sales. Stephen Churchitt was born on April 10, 1947, and appeared in Allo Allo in 1987 at the age of 40, portraying the buttoned-up wing commander Belfridge, a character embodying the British military's stiff upper lip, mixed with farcical charm. His crisp, dry delivery added comic contrast to the show's otherwise chaotic energy. Raised in the post-war borough of Bromley, he was the son of a World War II veteran and a quiet, emotionally distant mother. As a child, he found refuge in books and radio dramas, but his sensitive nature made him a target for bullying. He suffered from anxiety and insomnia from the age of 10, conditions that persisted throughout his life. Despite this, he won a scholarship to Victoria University in Manchester and became a fiercely intelligent presence in literary and acting circles. His career blossomed slowly, acting in EastEnders, Marple, and A Bridge Too Far, while also becoming a prolific screenwriter for shows like Inspector Morse and Kavanaugh QC. But behind his dual success lay a dark cloud. In the late 1990s, he was accused by a fellow writer of plagiarizing elements of an unproduced script, a claim never brought to court but privately settled with a non-disclosure agreement. The incident caused a brief industry rift, damaging his writing prospects. Churchitt was intensely private. He married once, to a theater designer, but the marriage ended in quiet separation after years of emotional detachment. They had 1 child with whom he had a strained and distant relationship. Colleagues described him as both brilliant and paranoid, obsessed with control, and frequently rewriting dialogue even during rehearsals. His greatest heartbreak came in 2010, when a pitch for a BBC drama was rejected after years of work, sending him into a year-long depressive episode. In his later years, he suffered from multiple health issues including chronic fatigue and arthritis, but refused to retire. Sher died on January 11, 2022, at the age of 74, reportedly of natural causes. His assets, composed of residuals and limited property holdings, were valued under £1 million. Peggy Ann Clifford was born on March 23, 1921, and joined Allo Allo in 1985 at the age of 64, playing a minor but memorable role as a French lady. A seemingly fleeting character whose expressive face and comedic timing subtly contributed to the layered texture of the village ensemble. On screen, she fits seamlessly into the fabric of the show's wartime absurdity, yet off-screen, her life was defined by a constant struggle for recognition. Born in Poole, Dorset, Peggy was the daughter of a failed merchant and a disillusioned piano teacher. Her childhood was spent amidst debt collectors and shame, often moving house to escape unpaid rent. Teased for her plump build and peculiar accent, she withdrew into mimicry and theater as a form of escape. After training at RADA, she began her career in post-war British cinema, typically cast as matronly figures or nosy neighbors. Though she landed a role in the revered Kind Hearts and Coronets, 1949, her performance was barely credited, and she remained trapped in the shadow of more glamorous actresses. She had few major roles and was repeatedly passed over in favor of younger or thinner women. In a bold but ill-fated move in the early 1970s, Peggy sold a small inherited block of flats in Clapham to purchase a struggling grocery store in Chelsea, hoping for financial independence. The venture failed within 3 years due to mismanagement and mounting debts, forcing her to return to bit parts in television. Quietly bitter about her lack of fame, she reportedly clashed with casting agents and cut ties with friends who had found success. She never married, and rumors swirled of a long affair with a married producer in the late 50s that ended in betrayal. In her later years, she became reclusive, known for hoarding memorabilia and living frugally in a rented flat in Kensington. Peggy Ann Clifford died alone on May 26, 1986, at the age of 65. The cause of death was not made public, but close friends cited declining health and emotional exhaustion. Her estate, consisting mainly of personal effects and meager savings, was valued at under £300,000. Kenneth Connor was born on June 6, 1918, and joined Allo Allo in 1984 at age 66, playing the hypochondriac undertaker Monsieur Alphonse. With his melodramatic flair and bumbling romantic pursuit of Edith, Alphonse became an eccentric fixture, beloved by audiences. But behind that comedic mask was a man tormented by insecurity. Born into a working-class London family, Connor's childhood was one of financial instability and emotional repression. Teased for his short stature and squeaky voice, he learned early to deflect pain with humor. Though he found success with the Carry On films, he privately struggled with feelings of artistic inferiority, often breaking down after performances. Colleagues remember his temperamental mood swings and perfectionism. His darkest professional moment came when he was abruptly dropped from a planned Carry On revival in the early 80s, a decision that crushed him. His private life was far from tranquil. Married to Margaret Connor for over 50 years, their relationship was frequently described as turbulent, marred by long silences and whispered affairs. His son Jeremy later admitted they had a strained relationship, especially during Kenneth's years of emotional withdrawal. Connor also developed a dependence on alcohol in the 70s, leading to several near-explosive encounters on stage sets. Diagnosed with cancer in his final years, he reportedly refused aggressive treatment, citing exhaustion and disillusionment with life. He died on November 28, 1993 in Harrow, Middlesex, at the age of 75. His finances were surprisingly limited. With modest royalties and no major property investments, his estate was valued under £500,000. Though the public saw a national treasure, those closest knew a man battling invisible demons and the weight of a career that never quite gave him the acclaim he craved. Richard Marner, born Alexander Pavlovich Molchanov on March 27, 1921, took on the role of Colonel Kurt von Strom in 1982 at age 61. On-screen von Strohm was a duplicitous yet comically inept German officer who exuded arrogance while privately trembling at danger. Fans adored his constant scheming, especially when paired with Gruber in the stolen painting subplot. But Marner's real life was more elusive. Born into a displaced aristocratic family fleeing the Russian Revolution, his childhood was one of loss and silent pride. Raised in England, he never quite belonged. Too foreign for his peers, too British for his Russian heritage. Emotionally distant, his early years were shaped by exile and self-restraint. Despite training at RADA and RAF service in World War II, his acting career remained peripheral. Behind the camera, Marner battled chronic underemployment and typecasting. His greatest career setback came after a brief appearance in You Only Live Twice, a role that could have launched him internationally but ended in obscurity. There were whispers among colleagues of his deep resentment and self-isolation, though no public scandal ever surfaced. He never married and left behind no children, fueling rumors of a long-suppressed private life. Close friends recalled a man consumed by past regrets and estranged from much of his extended family. After suffering several undisclosed health setbacks, Marner died on March 18, 2004, in a care home in Perth, Scotland, just days before his 83rd birthday. He passed quietly with no public fanfare or major obituary. His estate consisted primarily of vintage costume jewelry and modest savings, valued at under £400,000. A stark contrast to the commanding presence he portrayed on screen. Today, he is remembered as a ghost of wartime cinema, dignified, underappreciated, and shrouded in mystery. Richard Bonehill, born in 1949, appeared in Allo Allo in 1988 as a nameless German guard at the age of 39, a brief moment in a prolific but shadowed career. Known more for the faces he concealed than the ones he revealed, Bonehill was a master of disguise, playing stormtroopers, aliens, and masked villains in Star Wars, Highlander, and countless fantasy films. Behind his talent for fencing and movement was a man driven by anger and unhealed trauma. Raised in a volatile home with a violent father and emotionally unstable mother, Bonehill's youth was marred by physical abuse and repeated institutionalization. He was expelled from 2 schools and arrested as a teen before discovering fencing, which became both salvation and obsession. Though he trained actors and fought in major films, his career was far from smooth. In the mid-90s, he was dropped from a major production after an on-set altercation that ended in a broken camera and multiple injuries. Rumors of steroid use, emotional outbursts, and sexual aggression circulated, but were never confirmed. His personal life was equally fractured. His first marriage ended in scandal after his ex-wife accused him of controlling behavior and isolating their son, who later cut ties. A second marriage fell apart following a domestic dispute that neighbors claimed turned violent. Though never charged, the incident pushed him into deeper reclusion. He poured himself into coaching fencing, sometimes pushing students to the brink with punishing discipline. Friends say he feared dying forgotten, and he almost did. On January 29, 2015, Bonehill died alone in Truro, Cornwall, at 66, from heart failure due to an enlarged heart. His estate was valued under £300,000, most of it swords, props, and fencing memorabilia. Hollywood never gave him fame, and when he died, there was no fanfare, just silence, fitting for a man whose greatest performances were hidden behind masks. Thank you for watching as we reflected on the lives and legacies of the actors, from Allo Allo, who are no longer with us. Their humor, charm, and unforgettable performances brought joy to millions and helped shape the show into a classic. While their journeys ended far too soon, their impact lives on through every scene, every laugh, and every memory they've left behind. As we honor their lives, we're reminded of how deeply television can touch our hearts. Join us next time as we look back at more stars who left us too soon, but whose stories continue to shine.